Do you really live life with conscious intention and actually being present with it as you go about your day? Is the food you eat intentional? The exercises that you do? The stretching that you do? Do you even stretch your body? Do you have any vision for who you want to be, for how you want the quality of your consciousness and your mind to be? Or do you kind of just go throughout your day in autopilot, repeating the same patterns, kind of just suffering? You don't really know why, and it's just the same thing over and over and over again. Do you see how this is a problem when you don't actually apply your conscious attention to your life? Do you see how it's just unconscious forces dictating everything? Right? And the mind can come in very quickly and start to delude itself, and it says, no, I'm in control, right? I know what I'm doing, I'm aware. But that's just a fiction it invents right now, and you believe that, right? Whereas if we look at your actual experience, you don't really apply much attention to the sensations in your body. You don't just watch your thoughts. You don't really interact with life in a sort of smooth, conscious, mindful way. It's more so rigid, mechanical, unconscious, in this sort of machine-like way. And of course, I'm sure you actually understand that that is a big problem, right? So your conditioning runs the show until you begin to become conscious. This means that you are quite literally a robot, right? It's the stuff that you were conditioned with from the ages of like 0 to 18 that just go on to perpetuate themselves over and over and over and over again. And you have this illusion of progressing forward, but actually you're like a dog chasing its own tail, right? You have this illusion of really moving forward in your life, but there's no real fundamental changes that are actually happening. That's actually quite rare. So unless you really dig in to your own psychology and rewire it for a more optimal and desired experience, you can just expect it to be that early childhood conditioning up to around the years of 18 to your early to mid-20s, right? All that conditioning kind of just running it and then perpetuating itself, right? And you actually can go into this stuff, right? You can change your mind, right? You can actually process your emotions. You don't have to live in just states of numbness, disconnection, feelings of isolation, anxiety, constant worry, right? This constant sense of disconnect from yourself, from other people, fear, right? You don't actually have to live in those states every single day forever. Right? You can actually really change this circumstance. It's actually completely possible. Right? So do you notice that this is really a massive factor of your life? Right? And when you start to become conscious, it becomes very, very obvious that you were not very conscious before. You were not really paying attention to yourself. You couldn't just be in your body. Your body was always tense. It was always rigid. You were always avoiding your emotions. You're always distracting. You can't just rest in the sensations in your body, right? You don't have much of a vision for your life. You don't really self-actualize or self-transcend, right? The moment you really start to take this really seriously, like 100% seriously, there's a shift that actually begins to occur, a massive shift that you can't really undo. And it starts to really put you on your soul's path, on the path that's actually meant for you, right? So notice how your life is a lot of just the same general patterns, general habits, the same emotional states, the same thoughts, right? How it feels like to be you is very, very similar day in, day out, day in, day out, right? And you can actually just see that it's super machine-like, super robotic, super mechanical, right? And a lot of what goes into changing these aspects of your life, right? There's a lot of sort of surface level solutions that exist that of course just backfire, they don't really work, right? Really, the core solution here has to do with raising your consciousness of every domain of your life, with your life's purpose and your career, with your health, right? With your emotions, with your state, with your relationships, with how you relate to all of life, right? It has to do with observing and watching every area of your life closely and learning from people who have been doing consciousness work for years and really studying many different perspectives. Right? So you have to really begin to notice that you do not apply awareness to your life. Right? This just doesn't happen very much. Instead, your conditioning just runs 95% of your life. And you never really decide to make it conscious at a really deep level. I'm talking like the core of your being, not like a surface level thing of like, I was a perfectionist and now I'm not a perfectionist because I made this tendency conscious. I mean, yeah, that's helpful and that's great. But I'm talking like very deep stuff, like primal fears that actually control you every single day. Illusions that your mind constructs, like being a separate self. Very unconscious stuff that really runs the majority of your life and actually constructs the majority of your suffering. Right? I'm talking about this kind of stuff, especially this kind of stuff. This is more so the stuff we love to avoid. Right? So it's a psychological fact that 95% of what you do is dictated by unconscious forces. There's nothing wrong with having a subconscious mind and, having an autopilot system. This is the case for basically everyone. The problem is that it's conditioned. You don't really understand the entire process that occurred to get to where you're at and really what your conditioning even means and how it distorts reality and how it basically screws up your life, right? You don't really investigate that too much, right? And then it just kind of starts repeating itself. So it's like you've been programmed with something and it repeats itself, right? And we can shift that conditioning. We can actually change that conditioning so that it's, a more optimal and desired experience. And then that healthier conditioning is what repeats itself. That healthier, more conscious conditioning, right? A set of conditions that actually allows you to reach your full potential, to actually self-actualize and self-transcend, to actually feel good, to just produce states of well-being. To feel light, to feel healthy, to feel clear, to feel lucid, to feel sharp, to feel awake, to feel alert, yet calm, relaxed. So what happens if we actually begin to make all of our unconscious conditioning conscious? Or what happens if we begin to change the unconscious contents of our mind? What happens if we bring it to the light of our awareness? Right? Basically, you become free. You're free from all of the restrictions that you artificially held basically in your own mind. All these random limitations that you picked up as you experienced life, right, that just kind of got stuck in you, right? It's like you were kind of infected with something and you never really healed the infection. It's just been there, repeating itself over and over and over again. So your awareness alone is actually liberating. And simply applying awareness to your unconscious begins to dismantle it, right? Your unconscious is like a lot of your thoughts, right? Your thoughts are not very conscious. Your thoughts are very unconscious and mechanical. You believe them nonstop. You identify with them. All this is very unconscious, right? A lot of your sensations in your body right now are completely unconscious. Your unconscious mind isn't some separate domain that exists in some otherworldly realm of some kind. It's right here. It's right in this experience. It's not a separate thing from your experience right now. Right? It exists right here. And the second you really begin to know what to look for, right, you can actually start to change it. The second you know where to place attention, now you actually can really begin to change it. Right? So the problem here is that changing your unconscious mind and all this unconscious content can be very uncomfortable. You actually resist doing this. You actually fear this stuff because a lot of this stuff is uncomfortable stuff that you've repressed. Not only that, but it's just stuff you don't even want to admit about yourself. Right? So when you try and change it, fear arises. Your ego likes to just remain safe in its current structures. Your sense of self, your identity, likes to remain safe in its current form. That's what I mean by its current structures. And it's really, in a sense, you have a lot of parts of you that are unwilling to actually grow, to actually change, to actually investigate any of this stuff, right? To ever meditate, right? To just sit down and start observing yourself in a completely undistracted way. Notice how you're always distracted. You're always avoiding yourself. You're always avoiding sitting in an empty room with no stimulation, sitting there with your eyes closed, just feeling sensations, watching breath, watching your thought, watching your body, right? Watching your own awareness, watching how you identify with things that aren't you, like thoughts, feelings, sensations, impulses, things like this. Right, so you actually cling to the current circumstances that you find yourself in. You try and make all this impermanent phenomena permanent. You try and take all this ever-changing phenomena and try and make it a definite sense of self. Right, your beliefs, your emotional states, your habits, you identify with all this stuff. Right, you try and incorporate it into your sense of who you are. Right, and none of it is actually really you. You're like grasping onto illusions, trying to create yourself moment by moment. And it's this separate self, this ego structure, that is the root of most of humanity's suffering. Right? But there's nothing to even cling on to when you're really grasping onto impermanent phenomena, trying to habitually keep the ego alive. There's nothing to grab onto, because the moment you grasp onto something, it's already shifted, it's already changed. Everything is in this constant flow and change and sense of movement, right? At a very visceral level, you can detect this, right? And that only really happens when you develop a deep sense of self-connection to yourself, because you fear impermanence, you fear change, you fear this visceral sense of everything in motion. Nothing stays the same for 1 second. There's nothing to grab onto, nothing to hold onto, nothing to find a sense of self in, nothing to find security in. Because the moment you grasp it, it's already shifted and changed. And, and everything really just comes to an end at one point. Right, so you cling on to all this stuff, and it's this clinging onto the things you desire and the resisting and the rejection of the things that you don't desire. It's this inner tug of war that just creates a lot of inner turmoil and just suffering. Right? It's this tug of war that is one of the core pillars of your ego and the thing that has really founded it. It's like this is like one of the most foundational pillars of the ego. Right? So you're actually very safe to really begin to stop avoiding, to really investigate your unconscious. You're safe to really just sit with yourself, observe your actions, observe your thoughts, watch your feelings, feel them mindfully, right? To observe yourself in your everyday life, right? Notice the foods you eat, how they make you feel, the people you interact with, how they make you feel, the kind of information you consume, how it makes you feel. Notice that you actually are addicted to certain things that suck your energy, right? And you're almost hopelessly addicted to a lot of these things, like mindlessly scrolling on your phone, right? Or eating junk food, distracting yourself. There's all sorts of things that you do that suck away your energy, right? And you're actually addicted to them because this is a coping mechanism for forms of pain that you haven't addressed, and it's completely unconscious and mechanical, right? Like grabbing your phone and just scrolling over and over and over and over again. It's like this robot. It's a very robotic thing that you don't really apply any attention to. You don't really notice the background emotions that drive you to do this. You don't really notice the quality of your mind before and after. Right? So you're actually safe to start letting go and just surrendering into experience. You're safe to just begin to watch your mind, watch your emotions, watch your ego. You're safe to really investigate all this stuff rather than just being a robot. And the cold, hard fact is that, yeah, you're being a robot. It's mechanical, right? This is how the unconscious works, right? It's just this sort of mechanical, sort of autopilot thing that just perpetuates itself, and then it even denies itself. It denies any of this as well. Your patterns are just sort of mechanisms, right, that just habitually sort of try and survive, right? And you need to actually dig into these things, right? Or else you're going to live your entire life according to these unconscious conditions that you've been programmed with, right? Do you even have a vision for your life, for how you want your mind to be, right? For how you actually want to be experiencing life, whether it's in a more resistant way where you're fighting against it, or this more fluid, open way where you don't resist against it, right? Where you're actually open to life, you're open to the present, right? You're able to accept the present without needing to always be in this sort of tug of war with it. Right? Do you have a vision for how you want your body to be, whether you want it to be able to produce states of well-being, right? For your diet, for your career, for your relationships, right? And a lot of your conditioning is going to be getting in the way of the things that your soul really wants, right? Because your conditioning is built on fear and contraction and closure, right? That's the ego. It's this inherently constricting force. And your soul, or the core of your being, or, all this stuff, it's expansive. It wants to feel light, free, open. It wants to be brought to awareness. It wants to manifest in the world. And you are always at this war against yourself of habitually clinging on to safety, right? But also knowing that there's just something more. That this isn't really how life is supposed to be. This habitual clinging on to safety and security and this struggle and this fight and this suffering constantly. Right? It's this isn't really how life is supposed to be. There's just this sense of it of I didn't just come here for this. Right? There's something greater about existence. Right? That I'm missing out on. I don't know what it is, but it's I can intuit that it's there. Right? So that's it for this video. You can apply to work with me one-to-one. Link is in the pinned comment and the description. Take it easy.